Okay, so yeah, thanks, Gabriel, for being here. Our first speaker. So Gabriel De Seta, he is a media anthropologist. He is currently a postdoctoral research at the University of Bergen, and he is connecting, in fact, from Bergen, Norway. His research is grounded on ethnographic engagement across multiple sites. He focused on digital media practices and vernacular creativity in China. He's also interested in experimental music scenes, internet art, and collaborative intersections between anthropology and art practice. More information is available on his website, which I think he'll show in the slides. So yeah, so Gabriel, the floor is yours. You're mute. You're mute.
Yes. Okay. Well, hello everyone. First of all, quite happy to be here. I'm gonna share my PPT. So this one, we didn't try, but I hope you can see it. I'm gonna put it full screen. Hello. Yes. Good.
Yes, it works.
Okay. So this is my title slide. If there's any problem with my microphone or anything, just let me know.
Yeah, but it's working fine. Don't worry.
Perfect. So hello everyone, nice to meet you. Thanks, Vlad, for the introduction and for the invitation. Yes, so my name is Gabriele De Seta, and today's the talk I prepared today has been quite a ride, and I titled it Ethnography Post-Digital Platforms, Algorithms, and Automation. And it's going to be a kind of overview of methodology, I think, but also more broadly, how to study certain things as anthropologists. And oops, no slide. Yes. So, well, you can all see me, but this is me. And I thought I'd go through my background just a little bit to give you an idea, because I think you've been brave inviting me for the first talk here, especially because I'm not technically an anthropologist. I have a very mixed background, I say. So I did my master's in Chinese studies, and my thesis was basically, it was ethnographically grounded, but it was about experimental music in Shanghai. Then I moved to sociology, and I did my PhD in Hong Kong, where my dissertation was about digital media use in Chinese everyday life. Again, ethnographically grounded, both online and through on-site fieldwork. And after that, I was a postdoctoral fellow for 2 years in Taiwan at the Academia Sinica Institute of Ethnology, which is technically their anthropology department there. And there I kept writing about a little bit about Taiwanese experimental music, kept writing about platforms like WeChat and experimental ethnography. I worked as a curator for a couple of exhibitions showing some works, ethnographic and art intersections. And now, as Vlad said, I'm a postdoctoral researcher here in Bergen, and I'm working on a project about machine vision. So it's broadly about artificial intelligence and its applications on technologies that see or interpret the world. But I'm also interested in stuff like deep fakes and face recognition, of course, and QR codes, things like these. So this is the project. I'm not working on it alone. The project leader is Professor Jill Walker-Redberg, and we have a team of PhDs and some other research assistants. So it's a quite interesting exploration of machine vision. So my main interests are digital media, vernacular creativity, everyday life, broadly speaking. And in terms of my theoretical background, I often go back to stuff like practice theory, especially how it's been developed in media anthropology. But I also have a background in linguistics. So I found especially social linguistics and linguistic anthro are also things I often use. And then I look at technology and technologies through STS frameworks. So as I was saying, I use ethnography mainly as a research methodology, and that's the combination of these things is why I, at some point, decided that probably it was something like a media anthropologist, but it's very hard to categorize what you do. So today's talk is divided in two parts. That's how I thought about it. And the first one is dedicated to digital ethnography. I'm just gonna do a brief recap of methodology and explain why I'm interested in it. And then I'm gonna do a very brief interlude about this idea of a post-digital and use it to pivot to ask questions about what happens to ethnography after digital media in some sense. I'm going to do this through three main topics that are platforms, algorithms, and automation. And then just some conclusions, and hopefully we can have a Q&A about this. And I'm just going to sprinkle photos, mostly from Taiwan, things I still haven't written about digital media there. But the first part is about digital ethnography. And this part is grounded on things I actually wrote and published in the past few years, whereas the second part is more speculative. I'm gonna just spare you the whole spiel about digital ethnography. I assume this is you're an anthropology department, probably all familiar with all kinds of ethnography and problems in it and topics. So we're gonna skip through that, but I just wanna note a couple of things about digital ethnography. The first is that it has a very long history, has been around for almost 30 years. Articles like Escobar's Welcome to Siberia or Ito's beginnings about anthropologies of the internet already highlighted stuff 30 years ago that is still very relevant today, like the idea of technologies or cultural inventions or creating worlds, and recognizing in 1996 that the internet was a critical side of inquiry for anthropology. So today it still seems fresh, but actually when this was recognized 30 years ago, it was quite pioneering. And in these 30 years, there has been a proliferation of methodological discussions of digital ethnography. I mean, I haven't done any survey, but I have the impression that's probably one of the most discussed varieties of ethnography. There's all kinds of virtual, digital, internet, ethnography, virtual worlds, hypermedia, a lot of terminological distinction and subtle shifts. But these are only books I've read, but there's countless others that exist out there and articulate specific methodological approaches. So I've always been interested in digital ethnography, and I used it for several projects. And I'm also interested in seeing how it develops and how it changes. And a year ago, me and a colleague, Crystal Abedin, we published an article in which we joked about this idea of a buzzword ethnography, because we cataloged a lot of variants of digital ethnography that popped up throughout the years. And I'm just listing a few of them here in alphabetical order, but there's cyber ethnography, digital ethnography and anthropology, media ethnography and anthropology, ethnography, network ethnography, network anthropology, social media ethnography, virtual methods and ethnography. And these are only a few of the various articulations that I think have important differences and are useful as they've been created. But in general, I've always seen two approaches to digital ethnography, and one is from the ethnography towards the digital, and the other is from the digital using ethnography. And I think a clear example would be me playing a Chinese video game in Taiwan and doing research inside the game and talking to players inside the game and observing their practices or participating, versus me going to a cafe and seeing kids playing the same game there and talking to them. So one is ethnography, but done in digital media, and the other is of how the digital media exists in everyday life. And so I think there is a lot of interesting comparisons. The one is about seeing digital media as a legitimate field science, focusing on mediation, looking at new forms of sociality and emergent cultural practices, issues of virtuality, co-presence, how people embody, experience embodiment and avatars and profile pictures online. And in general, this approach focuses on how a medium makes us human. On the other hand, you have ethnography that is about digital media and the digital as part of everyday life. It focuses on use, on how digital media reconfigure sociality, how they remediate cultural practices, issues of affect and materiality, how people domesticate their devices or new technologies. And in general, the main question is, okay, how do humans make the medium? So I don't know if this makes sense, but this is, I've always read different approaches to digital ethnography through these two directions. And one thing that always struck me is that methods make worlds and also make media themselves. So while we joked about buzzword ethnography, I think it's important because this kind of proliferation of terminological discussions reflects actually the instability of technologies and also a certain urgency in creating epistemological approaches to them. And going back to Anne Beaulieu, who always, I think, wrote some of the best stuff on digital ethnography, she already recognized in 2004 that this struggling to keeping up with technology is a foundational aspect of digital ethnographic approaches. And the definitions of the key terms in methodology are actually very important because they actually shape research assemblages and the ethnographer's role in them. So if we call it virtual or digital, or if we talk about a cyberspace or polymedia or hypermedia, it's not just a terminological distinction, the need to write new things, but it's also actually constructing the media in which we do research. And one example I think is quite striking in Daniel Miller and Heather Horst's Digital Anthropology book. They start from basically grounding the entire enterprise of digital anthropology in an unambiguous definition of the digital, and they define it as everything that has been developed by or can be reduced to the binary. So in this like unassuming term, digital ethnography or digital anthropology, there are very important decisions about what counts as a certain technology and even the most basic ontological aspects of it. So what happens if you define the digital as just anything that can be reduced to binary, and what does it make? What does this do to anything in your ethnography? So I thought this is why it's interesting and important to look at the methodology itself. And so a year ago, we put together an issue about actually doing digital ethnography, and we wanted to collect a few intimate, private, personal articles from ethnographers who used methods or who studied digital media. And without going into it, the point of writing this kind of thing was to engage in a little bit of methodological critique and make a point and say, okay, where are we at with digital ethnography, and what kind of myths are we telling about it, and what kind of how are we constructing the method? But of course, I hope my contribution to the debate is not just critical. I'm also quite interested in refining digital ethnography for the study of specific topics. And a talk I gave last month was actually very, very much in this direction. I wanted to start figuring out how to use ethnographic methodologies to study digital folklore, so memes and online humor and stuff like that. And so I've been writing things from these two aspects, broader methodological critiques, but also trying to put together toolboxes for specialized aspects of digital media, in this case, digital folklore. So this said, and I hope this just gave you a brief idea of my interest in digital ethnography and how I'm writing about it. Today's talk is inspired by what
Gabriel, just before you go on,
yeah.
I think we have some noise in your
Oh,
voice.
okay.
Just,
Is it there when I don't talk?
no, it's when you talk, there's a bit of noise.
Okay. What kind of noise is it? Like,
Yeah, it's a bit of your turn. I think like go, but I think it's fine. Yeah, just let you know. I don't know if
well, I
it's
mean,
possible to change
I don't know
that.
how to fix it because I don't have.
Oh, you're not using phones. Okay, yeah, just go with it. It's not
I cannot
that,
use headphones with this computer, sadly.
no,
Is
yeah,
it
just go ahead then.
okay? Are you sure it's from me? If I mute, it goes away.
Yeah, it's I fixed for you, but just go on. Don't worry.
Okay, I can try to be farther or maybe turn the volume down. Okay, I hope it's a bit better. I don't know.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope it's still understandable. So
Oh no, yeah, don't worry. Yeah.
Okay. So I experienced this kind of a wily coyote turn in digital ethnography with my most recent project here, which is about artificial intelligence. And in this case, I guess the cliff is the digital and the coyote's ethnography, and the whole where he's trying, the void in which he's trying to walk is stuff like AI or algorithms and cloud computing and automation. So the whole point is that I arrived at this project thinking that I knew quite a bit about digital ethnography, and then I suddenly found that it was not really applicable to what I was going to study, because yes, for sure, they're still digital media, but they present quite different issues than the usual. So what I'm trying to think about is if perhaps this means that there's been a sort of a historical shift in how we understand digital media. And for this, I went back to the concept of the post-digital, which is not much discussed in anthropology or social science in general, but it comes more from humanities, digital humanities, and e-literature and digital art. And has been around for more than 20 years. So the discussion of post-digital, just to give you a sense, began in the late 90s from Nicolas Negroponte, who is this digital utopian, who started thinking that, okay, now we are in the future, plastics are no big deal. Is the digital destined for the same banality? And this idea of the digital becoming like plastics, so becoming something so mundane and integrated in everyday life that it's not a big deal anymore, has then been becoming like air or drinking water. The digital will be noticed only by its absence, not by its presence. And these ideas have been then incorporated first actually by academics writing about contemporary music, like Kim Kaskone in 2000, created this term actually and linked it back to Negroponte and said that he inspired him to call this genre post-digital, because the revolutionary period of digital information age has surely passed, and the tendrils of digital technologies have in some way touched everyone. So this discussion is then moved to a definition of an aesthetic of the post-digital. Some critics have defined as artworks, of course, that reject the hype of the so-called digital revolution. So it's been defined as a contemporary art term, and it has been contrasted to the idea of new media. Famously, Florian Kramer defined post-digital as something that is in direct opposition to the very notion of new media. And it's also being used to describe a kind of pervasive computational condition. David Barry, just a few years ago, noted that we might no longer talk about the digital versus the analog, but instead about modulations of the digital or different intensities of the computational. So as it has been developed by academics in different disciplines, this idea of post-digital moved from just a general sense of post-hype, post-digital hype, towards a quite specific definition of a certain condition of contemporary computational media. And this brings me to the most recent article by Florian Kramer, and it's an interview actually, in which he defines this term as a term that sucks but is useful. And I think it's an interesting. I very much agree with this. I found that post-digital triggers disagreement across many disciplines, but at the same time, it's very useful to define a condition in which the digital is not a difference anymore, but it's just a default state or a condition for human or non-human interaction. And so it is in this sense that I'm using it in this talk to kind of discuss digital ethnography. And so we are left, well, the coyote fell and we're left with this pervasive post-digital void, in which the digital is by now the default state or condition of a lot of our worlds. And this brings me to the main section of this talk, which is part 2, which I think is very much embodied in this drawing by a Taiwanese elementary school kid representing a drama in his life where he broke a smartphone in his house. And I'm going to start with one of 3 topics that I think are useful to explore what the post-digital means for ethnography. And the first is that of platforms. So I think platforms are interesting because they push ethnography towards a reconsideration of the idea of field and also of that of networks. So we're all very familiar with the traditional representations of the ethnographic field as a bounded locale or the site of a certain social group. And also with the more recent representations of multi-sided ethnography, which kind of expands it and finds ways of accounting for overlapping field sites. But the interesting part about digital ethnography is that it has largely actually reproduced this kind of imaginary of the field, and it has been mostly interested in finding the field back in digital media. So, for example, Tom Bollestorff's study of Second Life, this is an image from his book in which he argues that virtual worlds are places, and it means that they can be field sites. This placeness of the digital makes ethnography actually possible and conceivable. And even Jenna Burrell, who wrote about the field site as network, clearly drawing on imaginaries of information networks and network sociality, says that this imaginary of the field as a network allowed her to conceive of the field site, even if it was not a bounded locale or not a clearly bounded community. As she says, the advantage of defining the field site as a network is that it is still produces a continuous space. So what I think is useful here is to look at platform studies, which is a kind of an interdisciplinary body of research that has been thinking at how things have changed after the digital. And 2 useful metaphors that come from here are those of the stack from Benjamin Bratton, or more recently, Jose van Dijk, who wrote about the so-called platform tree. And platforms like Facebook, Twitter, or WeChat, or Alibaba, or Amazon are clearly not the websites of old, nor are they just distributed information infrastructures like the internet. But there's something more complicated. There's something that is layered. There's something where we have user positions and very complex relationships with layers below us, going down to the earth of material resources. And as Jose van Dijk has tried to visualize with this image of the platform as a tree, what we see is often just the crown of the tree where we have access, but we don't really see many of the branches and the trunk and the roots that go into infrastructure and protocols and systems that we don't really have access to. So I started thinking about, okay, what do these new kinds of spatial configurations from platform studies help us think through as we approach platforms ethnographically. And in my own work, this has, I think, clearly been embodied by a platform like WeChat. My early research has mostly dealt with websites and blogs and forums and all kinds of online communication that were web-based. But as of today, I would say 90% of my interaction with people in China are done through WeChat and some others through similar apps. And these are just some of the screens that I daily navigate to chat to people, download content, participate in groups, talk to commercial brands or official accounts, or even send payments or just find stuff, search. Everything is mediated by this interface on my phone. And this is basically my only access point to a much larger infrastructural stack of this platform that I don't really have a lot of insight into, because that's how it is mediated. So I think what is interesting here is that the platform is both a model to conceptualize these things, and as a metaphor that is commonly used in society, really pushes digital ethnographers to rethink the field, this idea of, yes, the field where we do research. And it encourages us to rethink it as something that is neither a virtual space nor an open-ended network. And platforms are inscribed with specific logics that are have been outlined as, like, they're programmable, they're modular, they are in competition with each other. And they're also volumetric, they're layered, and they overlap with national sovereignty or commercial interests in complicated ways that are much different from both the classic ethnographic field site and from the virtual field site of the internet or of an online game. And also importantly, platforms are extractive data architectures. They're built to capture data from the users. So whenever you do a fieldwork on them, you're not just entering a social context, or you're not just using a communication media. You're actually subjecting yourself and participating in these large socio-technical assemblages that are built to actually capture your data. So this is one of the first question that I'm asking myself, actually, and it is, how would an ethnographer platforms or a platform ethnographer construct and represent these new fields for ethnographic work? The second topic is algorithms, which are connected to questions of agency, another big anthropological concept. And algorithms are quite interesting because they mean very, very different things at very, very different scales. This is one of the simplest algorithms. What a computer scientist would tell you if you ask them what is an algorithm, they will say, well, it's just a set of rules and a process to solve a computational problem. And here it is, and you can look at it, and it's understandable if you studied computer science. But on the other hand, if you ask Facebook, this is from their latest explanation of what the Facebook algorithm is, it is a large, opaque, complicated system that they use to basically funnel data and consolidate it into different metrics, and they just tell you largely how it works, but you're not supposed to know the specifics and the technical details behind it. And between these two, I would say opposite or very far understandings of algorithms, there is how critical scholars think of algorithms, or also media critics think of algorithms, that is as kind of a metaphor or a myth about what these new platforms hide behind their interfaces, or a metaphor for how they regulate or construct sociality, something that users cannot reach. So luckily, in this area, in algorithms, I think digital ethnography has had quite important contributions, especially in the latest years, because anthropologists have been looking into algorithms, and they have started to propose strategies to approach them. And perhaps the first has been Nick Seaver, who has looked into the social construction of algorithms and how they become culture, or they are already culture. And he has noted that algorithms become a kind of myth that is attributed with great significance and power, but with ill-defined properties, through discourse, through discussion of them. And that if we approach algorithms as something that we cannot know, we risk co-creating this idea of the algorithm as black box, which is very popular in the industry, actually. And we risk perpetuating this idea that the algorithm is just, yes, this black box in which you have inputs and then you have outputs, and you have no way of knowing what happens inside it. And as an ethnographer, Nick Seaver has proposed a few strategies to approach algorithms. These are scavenging, tracing access, and parsing corporate speak, or treating expert interviews as fieldwork. And I recommend this article if you're interested in doing research on algorithms specifically. And Seaver's main purpose was actually to dismantle this idea of algorithms as inaccessible black boxes, but to reveal how they are heterogeneous and diffuse socio-technical systems. So, whereas platform ethnography is still not being theorized much, I think there are quite interesting ideas that are starting to be articulated about how to do ethnography of algorithms. And a more recent article by Bonini and Gandini just this year or last year, they started from Nick Seaver's strategies, and they did some research on I think Spotify and other music platforms. And by looking into algorithms, they actually found out that yes, there is no single black box. And once you open a black box, you are confronted as researchers with many other black boxes that are actually constructed by companies to hide different parts of algorithmic curation and labor and design. So yes, algorithms should not be conceptualized as black boxes, and also when you open them up, you risk finding more black boxes. And another interesting article has been written by Angela Christine, who also offered some strategies to enroll algorithms into ethnographic research. So not black boxing them and not just assuming they're opaque and unreadable, but to actually drag them towards us and redeploy them as methods in themselves. And she called the strategies refraction, comparison, and triangulation. But the basic idea is to treat algorithms as media in themselves that can be redeployed as ethnographic probes into your topic of interest, basically. And so these three articles, I think, are quite promising as pathways to start thinking about ethnographic research on algorithms and through algorithms that that don't reduce them to just digital media or some unknowable mechanism behind them. And in my research, I also I've been thinking about this specifically as I look into platforms like Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, which, as you might be familiar with it, it's basically predicated on this idea of simply swiping up and seeing more videos, endless scrolling, and the platform giving you more and more content of your preference, just learning from your choices. And here the algorithm is quite, is brought to the foreground, and it's also marketed as the defining function of this platform. So in conclusion for this section, the algorithm as both a mythical object, but also a computational construct, asks us to rethink what we mean by agency in digital ethnography. And to treat its opacity and unknowability as situated epistemologies of users and their creators. And the algorithm also challenges human-computer interaction that usually thinks through agency and affordances, because the algorithm is something in between users and computers. And algorithms are also a sort of a non-human actant that abducts agency because we delegate it to them or because they capture it. And an algorithm also see emerging strategies from both users and researchers to try to deal with them, to escape algorithms or to change what they do. So I think here anthropology is very useful because there is a long-standing canon of accounting for entities that are more than human, like gods or spirits, and algorithms could be conceptualized as something like that, something that people confront in their everyday life, and they have their own theories or practices to interpret them. So here's the second question, that is, how would a post-digital ethnographer trace these new mediations of agency, like algorithms? And this is the last section, which is on automation, which is also the section where I have read the list and the one that is that I've more recently started looking into. And I'm looking at automation specifically in China, how it is represented in some works of contemporary art, like Cao Fei's Asia 1. Here are some screenshots, in which automation is portrayed as a both eerie and effective engagement between two workers that are the only ones to remain in this huge basic e-commerce center, and the machines that have taken up all the work. So automation is represented as a kind of a poetic and an effective change in labor practices. But it also very much present in everyday life. Many Chinese tech companies have started investing in creating automation for delivery or logistics. And there are entire meme genres about ordering stuff online and getting it after 5 minutes, thanks through this reconfiguration of labor. And I've very recently written a piece about the use of machine vision in pandemic prevention. And here I found that machine vision enabled the deployment of automation through robots. And this was predicated to making the world legible to them so that they could substitute humans in certain labor practices. And commentators were starting to hail automation as an unmanned economy that was supposed to arrive in the near future. Here, I think ethnography can help specifically in how it's been articulated by design ethnography and looking into the near future. For example, Sarah Pink has done a lot of work in looking at how especially transportation and mobility in the city have been impacted by automation. And she proposes to look at automation as an ecology, an informational ecology, in which different kinds of automation clash with each other and often develop frictions. And here, a method to look at automation would be to see how people experience it and how they experience their new emplacements in the world. And here I'm thinking a lot about the how automation has been deployed in Chinese cities in things like automated jaywalker shaming that is powered by face recognition to kind of put new forms of governance through automation into the fabric of the city and how they're then discussed online. Which brings me to the conclusions for automation with this Douyin video about some 5G police robots in a Chinese city, which are quite common sites, specifically, especially on social media, where they're discussed as a kind of a futuristic examples of AI. Automation, so automation is both a displacement of labor and also a displacement of friction between different technological systems. And I think doing ethnographic research on it requires us to rethink practice, another central topic in anthropology, because these technologies, they are supposedly unmanned, often hide the delegation of labor. And both platforms and the gray boxes, not black, but let's say gray, often offer automation as a service for money. And following automation in the wild, so in how it is deployed in cities or industrial context, what often reveals is messiness and more friction. So perhaps following the messiness and the friction is a good heuristic to study it. And I'm also interested in looking at how the automation requires the world to be made legible for machines. And at the same time, it makes practices, especially human practices, less legible because they're hidden behind the labor of training or of maintaining these technologies. And as I said here, perhaps the direction to look into is the design ethnography or even user experience, that there is a lot of overlap with traditional ethnographic research as a research strategy. To answer the main question, which is how would an ethnography of automation account for changes in practice? And so these would be a few conclusions, which I think are would be perfectly encapsulated by this photo of a taxi in Taiwan that includes automated recognition of QR codes, GPS, management of gig economy labor, cars, all kinds of platforms to pay and reserve a car, all on the back of a seat. So my main purpose for this talk was, in the first part, to briefly trace the long history of digital ethnography and reflect on the terminological instability, and also to sketch the two main approaches that it has offered in the past 30 years. And what I wanted to emphasize is that the methods we use construct the media we study. So as digital ethnographers, it is useful from time to time to question the idea of the digital and to maybe think about the changes that it has gone through recently. So my use of the idea of the post-digital here is not to make ontological claims about we live in a post-digital world or something like that. And I do agree that the post-digital is a term that sucks, but it's useful. And my use here is to ask, okay, what happens to digital ethnography after the digital has become like plastic or electricity or air? And the way I am thinking of doing this is to look at new constructs and configurations with which we increasingly have to deal whenever we look into digital media. And these constructs and configurations are, in this case, I just picked platforms, algorithms, and automation, which each, I think, challenge key ethnographic categories like the field or agency or practice. So before we discuss, I just wanted to mention that there's a couple of, I think, very interesting readings that I have to do, and that would help me move the discussion forward. One is there is a great special issue of the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Society on the anthropology of data, which promises to discuss many of these topics. The other is this ontology of debates around the term post-digital that just came out, which, while not directly related to anthropological work, I think would be quite useful to for me to review the concept and see if there's any useful connection there. So if you're interested, this would be useful, interesting readings. And here are the references, which I'm putting for the recording mostly. So if people are interested, then they can pause and go back to them. They're not all of the references, but if you're interested in any, I'm happy to share other stuff I cited. So I'm going to go back to the conclusions, and then hopefully this made some sense, and I'm happy to talk about anything. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, that was brilliant. So as the chair, it is my pleasure and my privilege to ask you the first question before opening for other people's questions. So just telling people, if you want to ask a question, you can either write that in the chat or just use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, and I'll get your name and ask you to ask your question.
Yeah, I didn't check the chat at all, so I don't know.
No. Yeah, as far as I know, there's been no questions yet. And also, I do have to apologize because my internet, in fact, failed for a couple of minutes halfway through the algorithms part. But I will also go back to the recording later on when we release it. But anyway, so my question, thank you for this. Really liked it. And in fact, as you know, has lots in common with my own work and my own interests. So my question then comes from something that I myself have been struggling with. Let me try to phrase that. So I liked your use of the idea of the post-digital, but however, what I also find interesting is that what you also highlighted in the presentation is that stuff like I'm looking mostly at platforms and automation, but also algorithms. In a way, they are just they are these things because of friction, because it is in a way because it's problematic. So I would ask you in a way, and that's a very unfair question, but look forward in the future. We will get to a future in which things are post-platform, post-automation, and post-algorithms. By that I mean because especially with automation, I don't know if you've come across Douglas Hofstadter definition of artificial intelligence, in that artificial intelligence is that which hasn't been done yet. So it's always a moving goalpost. So my question especially with automation then, will become to a point in which this is not an issue anymore for social scientists to struggle with, I guess. So yeah, so you have any ideas on that, please?
Yeah, actually, I put automation in this talk when you asked me to do it. Not to put automation, but you asked me to talk, and I put it because I know you're studying automation, and I'm actually I just started thinking about it as a category. So I'm very curious about your approach to it, and what if you encountered the work of other ethnographers that are studying automation, because I think it's a very interesting topic, and you're right. I mean, the three topics I've taken here, platforms, algorithms, and automation, are not a typology. I'm not, it's not to say these are three very distinct domains inquiry. Actually, yeah. And as maybe I put the examples also to show that, yeah, WeChat or TikTok are platforms, and of course they're using algorithms in different ways, and they're also moving towards automating certain tasks like moderation or content curation or whatever. So they're all entangled. And yeah, I think you're right. There'll be a very near moment in which even these topics or constructs will become totally entangled and normal in everyday life, like plastic, electricity, and digital media, and those are the next. So there will be a post AI world as well, in which I think, yeah, there will be other topics to develop new research strategies for. So I'm not an essentialist. I don't think we can ever get to the right methodology. But yeah, so my use of post-digital here is just to say, just to document this feeling of, yes, many things written by digital ethnographers are great. And I think they're very relevant for the study of certain media, like internet websites and social networking platforms and maybe virtual worlds and online games. But as we move one step towards algorithms and automation, many of these topics become, if not irrelevant, they lose a lot of the critical edge. It's not really useful to keep thinking about, okay, what's the difference between online and offline, or the avatar and the body and things. But when you talk about platforms and algorithms and automation, there are things that I think need to be rethought, especially as field agency practice or other topics. And again, very the second part of this talk is very speculative. Things I hope to write maybe in the next few years as I do the research. So
Yeah, that's lovely. I don't see anyone wanting to ask a question, so I will ask another one. Oh, sorry. Xinyuan Wang, if you could, please.
Hi, can you see me?
Yes.
Hear me? Right. Thank you, Gabriela. A very interesting talk, and well, I come to you because I also quote your paper about WeChat sticker. Yeah. So well, you didn't mention that, but that is it's also very interesting. It's also a great case of how like the post-digital, the emoji become one of the 表情, the facial expression. Yes, I have one comment and probably one question. Oh, by the way, I come from UCL Digital Anthropology, so I just finished my postdoc fieldwork in Shanghai. So when you're talking about this, the ethnographic reflection upon food, I think it's both comment and question, because my personal experience is like, I feel because before it's like you have a specific field to go and you have 1 year, 1.5 years there and you left. But because of the nature of our study, doing digital anthropology, knowing people locally, but also add them on WeChat, QQ, or whatever social media platform. So my question is like, I feel like that I can never leave my field site, because even now I still keep contact with my PhD fieldwork, those factory workers on QQ. And this neighborhood is still like, it exists on WeChat group. So yeah, I don't know what you think about this. Like this, like post digital means like it, in a way you can never detached from your field. Obviously also like have significant consequence in people's sense of home, sense of place, and how they feel at home, etc., etc. So my other question would be slightly different, change of topic. It's more related with your second part about the anthropology of data and automation. Again, it's a big question because I do come across people ask us, so how do you think about big data? Because big data is such a buzzword in China. Now it's become slightly cooled down. When I talk with like people like the Tencent Research Center, they still want to find out how can anthropology deal with big data. So my question is a bit broad, but I want to know more about what you think. Do you have any experience of dealing with like even imaginable way to combine the strengths from anthropology and big data, any novel research methodology? Sorry, it's a long question, but
that's great. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna try. I hope I remember everything. So the first one, I think I have had a very similar experience. Anytime I did field work for different projects, and for me, the best description is still that of Jenna Burrell as the field as network. I very much resonate with it. So you cannot leave the field, and you're always entangled with it because of course, digital media help you keep connections, and they create this spaces, Facebook groups or WeChat chat groups or social media feeds, and you're always connected to it. And I think this actually says more about anthropology than about the media, because people experience media this way. I mean, our participants or any user does not leave the field themselves. I mean, they commonly experience this. It's like a continuum of their everyday lives and the media, and they live in a place and they move and they have groups. And so maybe it was just anthropology that were kind of remained wedded to that idea of going to a place and then living. And now we are experiencing that it's actually not really realistic. I mean, we can have the privilege of living and deleting all social media and never talking to the people again, but the normal course of social interaction would be remaining in it. So I think, of course, with your experience and mine, I just say that this has become like a new normal. That's perhaps the post-digital condition is precisely this, that it's just part of everyday life. And if you engage in a social context, then you can remain in it even at a distance. So yeah, I totally agree. And on the second one of big data, I think I haven't read the special issue on the anthropology of data, but probably there's a lot of answers there. I think big data, was a hype a few years ago, and now it's, the hype is maybe AI or just data or automation, but it's always the same thing, and it's always the same hype about basically automating ways of making profit out of people's data. And I have experienced when I did some consulting in engaging with private companies that, of course, what they're interested in us as social scientists that do qualitative work is to find ways of profiting. And so for them, the most immediate way is saying, okay, but what can you help us do with big data? Because that's what they have. They have raw or somehow refined data from their users, and they're always looking for ways of profiting from it. And I think there are ways of using this critically. I never done quantitative work, so I wouldn't know where to start, but I would look into digital methods, which is, I'm sure you're familiar, but it's like kind of a school of not ethnographic, but more data-oriented research methodologies between quantitative and qualitative that try to use data to do research about the platforms or to do research about companies. So ways to use this hype as a research tool. So maybe that's the one direction. Yeah. Thank you. I think.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I have here on my list first Yuli, then Rick, and then if any more people want to ask questions, Alex wants either raise your hand via Zoom or just let me know somehow that you want to ask a question. So Yuli, please.
Yes, thank you very much. So I have two questions actually. One is about, well, I'm not quite sure what the question there is, but I was really interested in the idea that that as a digital ethnographer or a post-digital ethnographer, as you like, your insert when looking at platforms, you're looking at extractive technologies. And I was wondering if there's something about contributing to it, and whether you're studying the extractive technology or the extractive technology is studying you or something like that. Don't know. I didn't get much further than that, but maybe you know more. And the other question is more about the idea of post-digital. I was kind of taken by your idea of post-digital as the air we breathe and the plastic analogy. But then I thought, especially when you're talking about how in automation, digital technology is displacing or masking labor, which reminded me of a particular thing in my field site where I was working in a warehouse, and I got to the warehouse because of automation, but this was, you looked around and there was no automation at all. So it was an e-waste warehouse where this company was kind of piling it up and sending it to register recycling to kind of make recycling more environmental and responsible and all that. But basically what they were trying to do through automation, what they called automation, is to get a system to register what comes in and what goes out, so they know what's in, because it was just piles and piles of shit, basically. And how automation looked like was 5 guys carrying these massive sacks on their, in India, sorry, I forgot to say. 5 guys passing these massive sacks of e-waste on their back from the pile to the lorry, and these supervisors checking the barcodes that are on it. And that kind of makes me wonder whether really you can say we live in a post-digital world, therefore the question of analog and digital and the interface between it doesn't really matter at all. I think it continues, especially in terms of the question of labor, it really continues to matter, because in countries like India, where the automation of food delivery website is really built on the sweat of actual people, and there's an aesthetic of automation, but in reality, people are working as hard or even more than before. I wonder if you can really do away with that question of analog and digital.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing. It's always great to hear from different parts of the world. I'm gonna answer the second one first, also because maybe I'll remember the first one in the meantime exactly. But yeah, I totally agree. And also, yeah, I think post-digital is not useful at all to say, oh, we live in a post-digital world and digital is everywhere. I think the point is more that even that has become harder and harder to find a place where digital media matter and a place where they don't matter and they're outside of it. Because I think even in your warehouse or fulfillment center or e-waste recycling center, how labor becomes organized is precisely because the digital has become so pervasive that I can live a great life and have automation around me because people in sweatshops in China or in e-waste recycling centers, their labor is reconfigured by the same digital media at a distance, and of course they don't get to enjoy the results of it, if not maybe a cheap phone or a cheap data plan or whatever, but they don't get to enjoy all of it. I get to enjoy have a new phone because that one is e-waste is recycled, right? But I think how I would look at it is that, yes, as you said, the automation is often a foil, and behind it is 5 guys text and the supervisor scanning them, right? So I scan QR codes to pay with WeChat or credit card or whatever, and they get scanned by their supervisor to smoothen the experience of logistics, basically. So I think the idea of post-digital here is precisely useful to describe this continuum that connects me to them, because the digital is so pervasive, and our experiences are so different. But yeah, this is mostly how I thought about it. And I was also thinking about the classical, very remote ethnographic fieldwork that, even today, you would be hard pressed to find a place where the digital does not have even a minimal impact in how like indigenous communities are imaged from afar or traced through some kind of digital media and stuff like that. So I'm not an expert, but just a sense of this. And what was the first question?
It wasn't quite well phrased, but it was about the extractive technologies.
Oh, yeah.
Not being...
Yeah. I think the lucky part is that these technologies work at scale that is so big that you're participating in it to do some ethnographic work. You're not really creating a massive amount of wealth for them. One more user or one less user is not really an immediate ethical concern. But yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that 5 years ago, when I was looking at a blog written by a Chinese person about this or that, or a debate, there was not that much going on beyond a person typing on a computer and some code being put on the internet. Maybe they paid hosting, and then I read it. But now there's this new intermediary that is the platform. And I think it's quite unavoidable, regardless of if you do digital ethnography or post-digital or however you prefer to call it. I think today anyone who does any kind of qualitative research, at some point, you will bump into a platform, even if you're talking to your participants via Facebook or you're checking groups or whatever. And so it's like these new mediators that are sneakily entering into our assemblages of people. And often we're like, either reduce them through, oh yeah, this is just the internet. I am using the internet sometimes, or digital media. Or we tend not to think too much about them, but I think it's important to ask how they're mediating our relationships and flows of data and information.
Right. Thank you. I'm also, I'll use this SIG just to say that we do have a platform, we do have a Facebook group, that this is where other seminars will be posted there, and also the recordings of this will be posted there. The link is in the chat, in the Zoom chat, for everyone to see. And now, Rick Adrians, please.
Hi, Gabriela. Thanks a lot for your talk. This was really super interesting. And like Xinyuan, I'm also at UCL, and I'm also a happy reader of your work. I've been sending lots of people your article on the 3 lies of digital ethnography. I thought it was really a very perceptive piece, and I really enjoyed your talk. I do, however, as I was listening, I was wondering, I thought your notion of post-digital, which is a literature I'm totally unfamiliar with, really nicely captures the kind of slipperiness of mediation, where at a certain point, a form of mediation basically becomes invisible because it's no longer seen as new, and as such, it becomes kind of part of the way we live. And I think the term captures that really well. But since you also admit yourself that it's that there are some problems with the concept, I was wondering if, I'm always a bit skeptical of the kind of terms that use that kind of temporal prefix, right? Like did the people in the Middle Ages know that they were medieval? New is new. When we read back in 30 years, new media, what's going to be new media then? So I was wondering if there's not a way of capturing this, which doesn't rely on this kind of temporal prefix, which I think as anthropologists we're kind of by nature a bit skeptical of. And in my own work, I've been lately trying to think through this kind of concept of augmentation. I've been finding that a useful way of thinking about it, how trying to describe more the kind of change, when you have a QR code on everything, how does it capture that? So that's really my only comment, but more generally, I thought that it was a really rich talk, and I would love to hear more about your work on music, actually, because I've been trying to set up in the last year a project on modular synthesizers in ethnography, basically, and that's really a scene where I think the post-digital is also there, although it's also post-analog, and I'd be happy to exchange. Maybe we can exchange thoughts about that some other time. But yeah, really nice to see you, and thanks for your talk.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled that you read my articles, but yeah. So just to start from the ending, modular. Just a note. I think if you look at Florian Kramer's interview or other things he wrote about post-digital, he mentions as examples of post-digital artists, musicians that use electronic musicians, synthesizers. So there is a clear connection there, especially because of digital analog mixes and things. So, and yes, I'm also always critical of these time constructions of time and temporality. And I don't remember which articles, but some discussions of the post-digital defined it as something like, this is not post as in postmodern, it is post as in post-punk. So it is kind of it is an aesthetic, and it is a very specific configuration of aesthetic, affect, and poetics, and just experience of the world and of media that does not necessarily say it is a period of time in which some things are happening, but it's always a risk, and it's also always hard to define the present, which I think is the usual anthropological debate about coevalness and ethnographic present and stuff like that. And so, I mean, augmentation could be one way. I'm also toying with a lot of different concepts like cognition and all kinds of vision, governance. I don't know. There's always thinking about different things of talking about the present. It's always easier if you write about 5 years ago, because you can make up. You have a much more solid ground to work on. But yeah, I mean, augmentation will be quite connected to these things, because it's kind of a way of making the world legible for users or machines through things that are often algorithmic anchors or markers. So for different systems. So I think it's something probably. This is why I wanted to bring the concept into a discussion in anthropology, the post-digital, because it has been discussed mostly by people in literature, online elit, and aesthetic contemporary art, which is very, very generative, but also not so theorized. So it's always, contested when you bring it to a more theory-oriented crowd, which I enjoy. So yeah, thanks. But yeah, let's talk more. I'm happy to.
Thanks.
Yeah, all right. On actually that note, we have 10 minutes and 2 questions. I don't know, Gabriel, whether you need to rush to something afterwards, or if you can.
No, I mean, no rush. I can stay another hour, whatever, if you want to talk.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's not do so much zooming.
Yeah,
Not
but
so much
I mean,
visual,
I'm
but
happy
yes.
I'm happy to talk as long as.
Okay, so Alex Pege, please. Did you raise your hand? Yeah.
Hi, thanks for that. That was really interesting. I thought the stuff you were saying about how kind of pervasive the digital has become, and like maybe were you kind of suggesting that it's not that worthwhile maybe drawing quite strict distinctions between online and offline, and that feels true just in terms of like how we live our lives, particularly this year. But because of that pervasiveness, I guess it's like, have you sort of thought about how to kind of define like a field site, like because I suppose that makes it quite problematic. So you were kind of talking about this idea that because of these kind of entanglements that happen and you're still always in contact, it's quite hard to leave them behind. So I guess like the two questions I would have is, firstly, like, do you think that like platforms or certain websites make kind of useful pre-existing like delimited sites for study, or like is that kind of a problematic notion in itself? And then secondly, what sort of like would you propose kind of methodologically as a way to delimit your own, like how do you find a focus when the digital is so pervasive?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for articulating something I wanted to put in the presentation, but I didn't know how. I think this is a key question, and also one of the key concerns with the idea of the field. And I think you are right in the sense that platforms kind of channel certain forms of participation and presence, co-presence and interaction, both synchronous, asynchronous. I mean, it could be Zoom or Facebook or whatever. But there are definitely ways in which, once you enter or access the platform, you are very much led to formulate certain kinds of fields or to identify boundaries. I don't know, if you go on Facebook and you start observing a specific group or participating in them, then you can easily say, okay, this was my field site, right? Or you could identify a few groups or a hashtag and say, okay, the hashtag is my field site, and anything that happens related to it. And so you don't have to say, well, Facebook is a field site, because it would be, just like taking a continent or something. But also, I think it is problematic because, first of all, you're delegating something that was a purchase of the investigator to decide, right? So, of course, yeah, you look at the boundaries of a village or an island or something, but you're still involved in the construction of it. So the whole debate in anthropology about constructing the field, and if you let the platform do it, then you're kind of perpetuating their design decisions that are often motivated by profits or by convenience or user design, stuff like that. So I think it's worth, first of all, recognizing how platforms are channeling research design. And then, questioning, okay, this is my field, but who made it for me, and why was it designed this way and not in another? And for me, yeah, I mean, I repeat, she's not paying me for it, but Jenna Burrell's Field Network is really, I think, important here, because she shows how she had a central role in drawing together this network of very disparate things that then became her field site. And I think that is a strategy that is very much useful in this case. Thank you, though.
Right, thank you. So now Ian, please. Ian Tellem.
Hi there, thank you very much for the presentation. There was a lot there to think about. I think my question kind of, it's a bit in line with Yuli's in terms of the way that maybe the term post-digital risks kind of remystifying some of the underlying mechanics of the way some of these things work. Like you had that Wile E. Coyote cartoon there, and algorithms are up in the cloud, but that just means that the cloud just means it's on somebody else's computer. The infrastructure is still there and it's physical and so forth. So on that line, though, along those lines, is there a problem it does the whole, well, not the whole post-digital idea, but the idea of considering it as post-digital, is that as a reaction to the fact that a lot of the access to the way these things are built, algorithms and so forth, is cut off from you. Like, you wouldn't necessarily be able to go to TikTok, Facebook, and see what they're doing to develop these algorithms, see how they're reacting to user responses. So you're only ever getting, you're kind of trying to reverse engineer what they might be doing or what the effects are from only the user's perspective. So like part of my PhD work is working with people who are developing robots. So I can talk to them about the algorithm they're developing so the robots can see and that sort of thing, and that's very useful. But without access to that, it is a bit mystifying. Because you don't even need to understand the algorithms in detail, as long as you've got someone there to explain it to you. Well, this is what we're doing, and obviously they're quite open with it. Most of them are PhD students themselves. So is that always going to be a problem unless you can get access to? These are often proprietary kind of, corporate, secret, patented algorithms and things like that, which you may never have access to. So you're always trying to look back at that. So is that a real weakness of the idea of post-digital? Is it just an admission that you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes?
Yeah, thanks. I think, so I think there's different cases. And so you're right, in some kinds of research, you can talk to engineers and they will tell you. And in others, the research I'm doing now, I joined some groups of basically developers from different tech companies discussing machine vision products. And there, you can talk to them, but also they don't really know how things work. And, there are layers and they're kind of putting together blocks, but they don't really know how they work behind the blocks. And in other cases, like the paper by Nick Seaver and others, they try to talk to engineers, and the engineers would not talk back to them, or the companies would not tell them. So I think there are different kinds of different layers of obfuscation between which these kind of systems are located. And I think it is a clear difference, because 10 years ago you would go to a website, and if you're interested in how it works, you look at the source code and you look at the source code, and if you know the code, you can kind of unpack it and retro engineer it. And then it has become more and more difficult with nested systems and cloud computing and various kinds of delegation. And so that's why I think digital methods started to be more and more popular, because these things become more opaque. So you need more complex strategies to unpack them and retro engineer them. And today we are kind of left with this choice of either you go ask someone to tell you how a thing works, or it's really difficult to unpack it. And I think, of course, it is a commercial decision from many aspects, because it's competition to provide services, and you need to maintain intellectual property and whatever. It is also probably one of the driving questions of why this kind of idea of the post-digital has gained traction, because it's not so much about analog media, digital media. Look at how they work, know how they work, get literacy, and do what you want. It has become more, these are services provided by companies, and it's become increasingly difficult to know them. But I agree with you. I'm always interested in talking to people about the systems and finding very nuanced barriers at different levels. So thanks.
All right, thank you. So next is Shamsuddin Payne, I think. I think I pronounced that right, sorry. Hang on, you're mute. Right.
Well, okay. Actually, that is Shamsuddin Pane. Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Yes, it's okay. Thank you, Mr. Gabriel. Actually, I'm Shamsuddin Pane. I'm from Indonesia, and now about 11:30 p.m. And I'm studying social anthropology in second years. So actually, I'm not good in English actually, but I'll try my best. So before that, because we know that anthropology mainly by the process anthropology now have like digital anthropology, and I just learn about digital anthropology, and because this pandemic we know that some platform like Zoom or another platform used for like virtual tourism. Now, in some months, I will going to research about this virtual tourism with my themes because we got funding research from the ministry because from the competitions, and I like to ask you about how do you think about virtual tourism, and do you have any experience about this, and how the impact to the society and the economy? So how goes this, and how by the process? I know I mean like how long it can be, how long the virtual tourism will be processed, and how do you think about this? Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I have I do a mistake. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's great. I don't know much about virtual tourism, but I can imagine it's. I mean, I read some articles discussing it. Also, actually, also in Southeast Asia. So I wonder if it's a local hype about it. I've never talked to anyone who did virtual tourism, but maybe it's interesting to look at the work of anthropologists that have looked into virtual worlds, like Tom Boylstorff on Second Life, or Boninardi on World of Warcraft. Just look at video games and Second Life, because I think that was where these ideas of doing tourism virtually was also present and used. So people going, on doing tourism in virtual worlds, which is probably useful to think about how it could be done today through digital media, through platforms. But I haven't studied it, so I don't know much. But I hope looking into methodology can help you do a interesting project about it. Yeah, looking forward.
Right. Thank you for that. And yeah, and thank you, Shamsuddin. Your English is completely fine. As a Brazilian, I understand what you're going through. Okay, so this was our last question. Just before we finish, I also wanted to say, like Rick Adrians, everyone that's interested should look at Gabriel's article on the 3 lies of digital ethnography. That was a very good influence on me definitely wanting Gabriel to be here today. So everyone go there and have a look. And Gabriel, I wanted to know first, how can people reach you? Like, are you online at all? Let people know.
Yeah, sadly, I'm extremely online. Yeah, I mean, I guess email is what is most reliable if you have questions. But I'm on Twitter. I can share. I'll put my hashtag in.
Yeah, you also do have a website.
And my website, yeah. I guess these will be the main 2 things besides email.
Right,
Email,
thanks, Rick.
Yeah, you can use whichever you find online, but
yeah, and just not want to pressure you in that sense, but is there anything that people can look forward to, or stuff that you're planning or doing, or future research, or any kind of glimpse of what's next with you, I guess?
Yeah, I'm kind of on hold because of, like everyone else, I imagine, for pandemic reasons. So I was supposed to be on fieldwork now, but it's probably delayed of at least half a year until after summer. So I will be working for months to a year in China somewhere. I'm still not sure where, but looking into machine vision technologies. So that's for next year. And now I'm just doing online work. So yeah, observation, participation, interviewing some people through the internet. And yeah, I have some articles. One thing is I just finished writing an article on deepfakes in China. and that should come out in the next few months. So if anyone is interested in deep fakes and weird facial recognition stuff, that could be interesting.
All right. Thank you. So next week we have another seminar. It's gonna be the same time with Megan Moore, Watching Spider and Counting Bunnies: The Role of Nature in University Students Coping During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Hope to see some of you next week. Thanks again, Gabriel, and thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks
Bye.
everyone for the great questions. Have a nice evening or night.
Yeah, a nice night or
Yeah.
yeah. Bye-bye.
Well, I should check the chat. I haven't looked at it at all.
Yeah, some people say, yeah.
Oh, they're asking how to get the recording.
Yeah, so the recording will be in the Facebook group, and the link to the Facebook group is also in the chat. Right. I don't know, yeah, let me stop the recording as well.
Yes.